Hi, welcome to this video. I'm going to be sharing with you my 5-star reads of 2024. Grab a cup of tea, coffee, and let's get cozy and get into it. I have my blanket on. I'm really excited to talk all things books with you. My favorite kind of two genres to read in are dark academia and classic literature, so I have quite a few of those today. Let's start off strong with the love letters between Vita-Sackville West and Virginia Woolf. The love they have for each other is so authentic and real and relatable. At a dinner party in 1922, Virginia Woolf met the renowned author, aristocrat, and sapphic Vita-Sackville West. Virginia wrote in her diary that she didn't think much of Vita's conversation, but she did think very highly of her leg. It was to be the start of almost 20 years of flirtation, friendship, and literary collaboration. Their correspondence ended only with Virginia's tragic death in 1941. Intimate and playful, these selected letters and diary entries allow us to hear these women's constantly changing feelings for each other in their own words. Eavesdropped on the affair that inspired Virginia Woolf to write her most fantastical novel, Orlando, and glimpsed into their extraordinary lives from Vita's travels across the globe to Virginia's parties with the Bloomsbury set, from their shared love of dogs and nature to their grief at the beginning of the Second World War. Discover a relationship that even 100 years later feels radical and relatable. Left me feeling like I was rooting for them so much. And 1922 to 1940, being gay was definitely not allowed. You just want them to be together. They clearly love each other so much, and the way they write about each other is beautiful. I remember underlining almost entire paragraphs at some point. One of my favorite ways I have ever heard two people write about each other. I think there's a slight moral dilemma in reading letters of people that are no longer with us. However, it's just so good. I couldn't stop. A lot of book talkers and booktubers that I like enjoyed these letters. Moments of jealousy, longing, love, affection, complete adoration of each other. You will get a lot from this book. I highly recommend, and this one was instantly 5 stars for me. I, who have never known men, I see this book everywhere, and it definitely lived up to the hype. It's very short. I think it's between 150 and 180 pages, but it's very impactful. It was originally written in the 90s, and it wasn't as popular when it first came out, and now it's kind of making this popular appearance. I've seen it all over Book Talk, so I'm happy about that because I think this book is really important. Underground, 39 women live imprisoned in a cage. Watched over by guards, the women have no memory of how they got there, no notion of time, and only a vague recollection of their lives before. As the burn of electric light merges day into night and numberless years pass, a young girl, the 40th prisoner, sits alone and outcast in the corner. Soon she will show herself to be the key to the others' escape and survival in the strange world that awaits them above ground. So I don't want to spoil anything, but I think a lot of my book recommendations I give are books that don't have a super clear plot, and it's very character driven, and it's kind of a fever dream or dystopian. I wouldn't say dystopian is a huge category I enjoy, but with this one, I really enjoyed it. You just have no idea what's going on, and the author wants to make you feel confused because at some points when they get up to the real world and you don't quite know what's going on, you think, okay, maybe there was some sort of atomic bomb and there's no other humanity, but the author finds ways to disprove that. So you're just left always feeling confused. You don't even know if they're on Earth. The way that these women have to survive together is really beautiful. It's a feminist story. It's a story of survival. It makes you question life because this main character is trying to help them survive, but survive for what? There isn't a world ahead. She doesn't have family, and it kind of made me sit back and think that I'm someone who really enjoys life, and I'm very grateful for every day. But if I really had no family, no education, even when she reads books, they're about things she doesn't really know or understand or has felt before. It makes you wonder, how much would you push on if there wasn't something kind of to live for? No, but is life and existence just what there is to live for? It kind of gets you thinking about that. Started and finished it in one night, which never happens to me with books. It's very rare that something can grip me to that point. I stayed up until 3 a.m. just to finish it. Next up, we have a memoir. I love listening to memoirs on Audible because I just think hearing someone's life story told in their own voice is beautiful. Like I said, Pamela Anderson's memoir is one of my favorites. I'm currently listening to Viola Davis's memoir. I liked Matthew McConaughey's, but Julia Fox I read last year, and this was a 5-star read for me. First of all, I love her voice. It really grips me into her story, and you will never read anything like this, I don't think. This is such an interesting, once-in-a-lifetime read. Captivating acting, such as her breakout role in the film Uncut Gems, her trend-setting style, including bleached eyebrows, exaggerated eyeshadow, and cut-out dresses, her mastery of social media, where she entertains and educates her millions of followers, but all these boys share the trait for which she is most unabashedly and unapologetically being herself. Adore Julia Fox. Her parents' volatile relationship that divided her childhood between Italy and New York and left her largely raising herself a possessive and abusive drug-dealing boyfriend whose torment continued even within Rikers Island, her own trips to jail as well as to a psychiatric hospital, her work as a dominatrix that led to complicated entanglements with a sugar daddy, a heroin habit that led to New Orleans trap houses. Into all this is such a long-winded synopsis, but the story will grip you. It is so entertaining and you will feel heartbroken for all of the loss she experiences. You'll also be rooting for her. I don't know, there's something about the nonchalant way that she speaks mixed with these heavy, crazy topics that just make for a very entertaining book. The sense of danger when she was young is so low. You're almost like, were you ever worried about anything ever? And her life story is something you will not want to miss. I promise you that, because it is a wild ride. I probably can't say this book title in this video, but here is the book I'm going to be talking about next. I could not put this book down. This is a coming-of-age novel in such a brutal way, but it feels so real. Even though the girls' lives are kind of surreal to most of us, their parents keep them completely isolated in their home. So although the circumstance may not be that relatable to some of us, the isolation that we feel in our adolescence is prominent throughout the whole novel. I think it's a very interesting choice to tell the story through these teenage boys that watch them from across the street. They meet up at one of their houses and they just watch these girls and try to figure out what's going on. The house is deteriorating slowly, one by one. They're dying and they just don't understand what's happening. And I think that a lot of us as women feel that way, you know, the way that we're kind of watched and misunderstood and ridiculed especially in our adolescence and throughout our whole life. The narrators are supposed to be unreliable. And I saw some reviews saying that they didn't like how the boys talked about them and over-sexualized the girls and didn't understand them, but I feel like that's kind of the point of the novel, and it's kind of a commentary on society. There's topics of age, race, morality, capitalism, society. It's such an interesting novel that I think really carefully intertwines a lot of bigger topics. So the title of the book is so shocking that right away I was like, I need to read that, because how did an author make a book called that? The sisters seem to have this bond that we really don't understand. I have yet to see this movie. I've heard it's good. I will eventually do a review and let you know what I thought of the book compared to the movie. I have said I want to do more video essays on this channel. I just did one on Madonna in a fur coat that I will link. I'd love to dive deeper into each of these books. My next 5-star read is Almond. It's about a boy who lacks emotion because of a brain condition, I believe, and he is navigating life after his mother and grandmother are murdered in front of him. Youngzae. Okay. Youngzae was born with a brain condition called I'm gonna put the word up. That makes it hard for him to feel emotions like fear or anger. He does not have friends. His devoted mother and grandmother aren't fazed by his condition. Their little home above the mother's used bookstore is decorated with colorful post-it notes that remind him when to smile, when to say thank you, and when to laugh. Youngzae grows up content, even happy with his small family in his quiet, peaceful space. Then on Christmas Eve, Youngzae's 16th birthday, everything changes. A shocking act of random violence shatters his world, leaving him alone and on his own. Struggling to cope with his loss, Youngzae retreats into isolation until troubled teenager Gon arrives at his school and begins to bully Youngzae. Drawn by curiosity, the two strike up a surprising friendship. As Youngzae begins to open his life to new people, including a girl at school, something slowly changes inside him. This book is really beautiful. I liked this review here. Let me pull it up. I personally found this story compelling. In a different setting, I don't think it would have had the same impact. And while there's definitely subtext of commentary on Korean society overall, I feel like the author was teaching a fresh young adult coming-of-age story, which this certainly is. This is why I love international books. They're always so different from what is traditionally published here in America, and I find that so refreshing. The prologue, it states, I won't tell you whether it has a happy ending or a tragic ending. Neither you nor I nor anyone can ever really know whether a story is happy or tragic. I think that perfectly sums up this book. It is sad at times, but there is still hope and happiness. The boys' dynamic together is very interesting because we have one who lacks emotion and one who feels way too much emotion, and he's very hurt in this world. He especially feels anger very prominently. I think the concept was very well done. The writing is very accessible, so you can read it quickly. His mother and grandmother are trying really hard to make him not stand out, and it's such an interesting thing to think about because because they really believe that they're helping him by trying to make him like other people. And they do accept him for who he is, but they just don't want him to be bullied and ridiculed by the other kids, because we know that that happens a lot in youth. Kind of the way we're told to behave in society, and he's going against all of his natural instincts as someone who doesn't feel a lot the same emotions as other people, and then he has to try and fit into this mold in society. But I think because Gon feels like such an outcast, so does Youngjae, and they kind of find this common ground there between them. Even though they're so different outwardly, this kind of inner outcast feeling is really prominent between the two of them. It had me crying, which is actually hard to do with books. I'm going to recommend 2 Mona Awad books, and as I said, I love Dark Academia. Bunny, I finished last January, so a year ago, and I still think about that book all the time. It is the ultimate fever dream. Samantha Heather Mackey couldn't be more of an outsider in her small, highly selective MFA program at New England's Warren University. A scholarship student who prefers the company of her dark imagination to that of most people, she is utterly repelled by the rest of her fiction writing cohort, a clique of unbearably twee rich girls who call each other Bunny and seem to move and speak as one. But everything changes when Samantha receives an invitation to the Bunny's fabled smut salon and finds herself inexplicably drawn to their front door, ditching her only friend Ava in the process. As Samantha plunges deeper into the Bunny's sinister yet I don't know how to say that word, world, beginning to take part in the ritualistic off-campus workshop where they conjure their monstrous creations, the edges of reality begin to blur. Soon her friendships with Ava and the bunnies will be brought into a deadly collision. I don't even think there's actually words to describe this novel. It's just so different from anything I've read before, and it's the type of writing that as the book goes on, you're more confused, yet you can't put it down. One of those writers that you'll love or hate. You might think that the confusing lack of plot and just overall fever dream is annoying and too much, or if you're someone like me, it's a genre of writing that I just cannot put down. There's something about the way she writes from the mind of the characters, with the interjection of intrusive thoughts as well as like what's happening in the real world. Don't know what's happening and what's real and what isn't. I'm trying to find the words for it and I just can't. I would just really recommend it, as well as All Is Well by Mona Awad. Anna Fitch's life is a waking nightmare. The accident that ended her burgeoning acting career left her with excruciating chronic back pain, a failed marriage, and a deepening dependence on painkillers. And now she's on the verge of losing her job as a college theater director. Determined to put on Shakespeare's All's Well That Ends Well, the play that promised and cost her everything, she faces a mutinous cast hell-bent on staging Macbeth instead. Miranda sees her chance at redemption slip through her fingers. That's when she meets 3 strange benefactors who have an eerie knowledge of Miranda's past and a tantalizing promise for her future. One where the show goes on, her rebellious students get what's coming to them, and the invisible doubted pain that's kept her from the spotlight is made known. This is a beautiful meditation on kind of the healthcare system, the way she is ignored, and honestly, everyone's even just annoyed by her and how much pain she's in. They're like, can't you just get yourself together? And I think a lot of the time as women especially, we can be dismissed in the healthcare system, so I thought that that was a really cool theme throughout the book. Another book that you'll just completely lose yourself in. It's an immersive reading experience. It's a fever dream. It blurs the lines between reality and fiction. A lot of people on Goodreads I saw, they felt like the book started off really strong and then kind of lost the plot throughout, but I find that's kind of how her books go. You are already not fully in reality ever, I think, in her novels, but they start off kind of normal and then go down a crazy loophole, and that's what I like about her writing, because I feel as the book goes on, like I said, I can't put it down more and more. So you just want to know what happens in the end. But again, I wouldn't read it for a super clear plot. I would read it if you want like an immersive fever dream, crazy reading experience. Puts you in the mind of characters is beautiful. Also read Rouge by her. There's a few books I think I still have to read by her, but I will definitely be reading every single one. I adore her writing style. From what I've read of her, I've read 3 novels. They're kind of similar in writing style, so I would say space them out. Don't read her stuff too close together because they can kind of feel a bit similar at times. But I think it's just so unique that it's going to feel similar because I haven't really read anything like her. The Picture of Dorian Gray. Enthralled by his own exquisite portrait, Dorian Gray exchanges his soul for eternal youth and beauty. Influenced by his friend Lord Henry Wotton, he is drawn into a corrupt double life, indulging his desires in secret while remaining a gentleman in the eyes of polite society. Only his portrait bears the traces of his decadence. The Picture of Dorian Gray was a success of scandal. Early readers were shocked by its hints at unspeakable sins, and the book was later used as evidence against Wilde at the Old Bailey in 1895. So Oscar Wilde is one of my favorite writers of all time, if not my favorite, probably between him and George Orwell. De Profundis I talk about all the time, but I didn't read it in 2024, otherwise it would be in this video. My favorite book of all time, it's a letter to his ex from prison. Oscar Wilde was in prison for being gay. It is the most haunting, heartbreaking, beautiful letter I've ever read in my life, and just instantly fell in love with Oscar Wilde. So I read The Picture of Dorian Gray after reading that. It's also in my Classics for Beginners video that I will link down below, as well as in the eye. I encourage people to read classics. I really love them. This is a very accessible text. There will be a few points I think where things are a bit over-explained or dull, and you might kind of get bored if you're not used to classics, but if you are, you'll kind of know that that's just sort of how things were written at times back then. But I still highly recommend it if you can just push through a couple of like boring chapters here and there. The book has a lot of twists and turns, more than I was expecting, and I will not ruin it because this book had me on the edge of my seat. In the age of social media and Facetune and anti-aging, this and that, I think this book still lies very prevalent today in its themes. It's kind of funny how no matter how much we change throughout the years, whether the actual like circumstances change, because I think this book would have been written in the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was written so long ago, the themes are still very much prevalent today. Society can slightly change, or technology and advancements, but humanity kind of stays the same at the core in certain ways. I wrote that Dorian's sins and immoral behavior goes right to his painting, which is a portrait of him. So the painting is able to absorb all of these sins, and he stays beautiful in the real world. Meanwhile, this painting is deteriorating, which is such a cool piece of symbolism. Painting becomes as ugly as his spirit is, but you would never know his spirit is that ugly because he's just gorgeous and everybody is enthralled by him. My critique is I don't like how the women are written in this story, but again, it's a classic that is a product of its time. I read that as kind of like a political commentary of the Victorian era, where everyone was meant to, especially the rich people, meant to present well and be beautiful, but there was obviously still so much shady stuff going on behind closed doors and a lot of corruption, and of course that is also still a theme of today. The last one is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. It's one of those books we've all heard of before. Even if you don't read classics, you know this book. Raskolnikov, a destitute and desperate former student, wanders through the slums of St. Petersburg and commits a random murder without remorse or regret. He imagines himself to be a great man, a Napoleon, acting for a higher purpose beyond conventional moral law. But as he embarks on a dangerous game of cat and mouse with a suspicious police investigator, Raskolnikov is pursued by the growing voice of his conscience and finds the noose of his own guilt tightening around his neck. Only Sonia, a downtrodden sex worker, can offer him the chance of redemption. That's an interesting synopsis for it. I wouldn't say it's a totally random murder. I'd say it was highly motivated, and that's what makes the book so interesting. The book is kind of just set up in a bunch of different moral dilemmas. You feel like you're just kind of taken story by story. One example I will give is at one point, this man who Raskolnikov has met in a bar, he's a drunk man who has drank away all of his family's money. He has a bunch of kids and a wife, and he's basically left them in worse poverty than they could imagine. And he's dying, and his wife still doesn't offer him forgiveness on his deathbed. Interesting concept, because it made me think, should we, give someone that love and forgiveness in a time of death, which is, obviously very tragic? Or was she right to say, you have made our life horrible, and I don't feel bad just because you are now dying and an accident happened. Your actions were still your actions. So the book is kind of set up like that, where a lot of different things happen throughout, and you'll just kind of sit there wondering who you agree with and what you believe. What I found to be one of the most interesting things for me reading it is I empathized a lot with the character, which is strange because he's quite heartless and he's not the most relatable character, but sometimes he's more moral than I am and sometimes less moral. And he's kind of debating if he should just turn himself in to get rid of this guilt, because he doesn't feel emotional guilt. It's more guilt and like fear of getting caught, I would say. But he's so poor that he commits this murder because, sorry, I'm going to go on a tangent, but this old woman is abusing her sister and she has so much money. And so he thinks, if I kill her, I can get the money, sell all her jewelry, and then her sister will be rid of this abusive old woman. So he kind of thinks of it as she's better off dead than alive. There's more benefits to her being dead. And you kind of find yourself going, yeah, I kind of get that. But obviously murder's wrong. And then he you ask yourself, is the punishment the guilt that he's feeling throughout the novel, or is it some sort of justice and legal punishment? At the same time, when he's debating if he should turn himself in or not, I was like, if I had gotten away with murder, I don't know if I would turn myself in, but I also wouldn't commit murder. So it's just a really cool book for that reason. You'll find yourself agreeing and disagreeing with characters, and kind of most times I felt I was somewhere in the middle where I was like, yeah, I don't actually know what I think about this. It'll have you questioning religion, forgiveness, morality. Very amazing book, and it's definitely a classic for a reason. I was gonna rate it 4.5 because I do think it could have been like 150 to 200 pages shorter, and it did feel like quite an Everest to get through at times. But his writing, if you go into it knowing that Dostoevsky is a rambler and he writes a lot and he's a very wordy writer, then if you go into it knowing that ahead of time, it should be a little bit easier to digest. That is a brief overview of my 5-star reads. I will be totally honest with you guys that I felt quite disappointed in how many books I actually finished, because all I do is read and I didn't feel like I had a lot to show for it. I don't know if it's the brain rot from social media that made me have to keep switching books, or like I started The Count of Monte Cristo and I was absolutely loving it and I just didn't continue with it. It felt like it was just such a long book to get through and I got overwhelmed, but I want to pick that one back up. And so I did my January reading wrap up. I'll also link that below and in the eye, and I finished 5 books in January. It just is my goal now to see things through. Unless I really hate it, then like life's too short, just DNF it. Trying to make it more of a goal to actually finish novels, because I'm disappointed in how many I actually finished in 2024. So these were the ones I did finish, and there were more as well, but these were the ones that are 5 stars, and I hope I have more to choose from this year, so at the end of the year I can make a better 5-star read video with more books in it. Hope you enjoyed this video. You can subscribe for all things book and art related. I make tons of videos about books and creativity. I'm making an EP currently, and I'm also vlogging my life here in England. If you're interested in that, I would love to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. As always, please let me know what you think of all of these books. I would love to hear your thoughts, or if they're on your TBR. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!